Welcome back. Again, we're focused on politics tonight, and we turn to the battles brewing across some of New York's congressional districts, and some of the races really tight. And where else? But let's start off in the 1st district. Democratic incumbent Tim Bishop, he's got a 10-point lead over his Republican challenger Lee Zeldin, but the numbers show that thing is really tightening up here. And another closely watched race, that's in New York's 11th congressional district, where embattled Republican Congressman Michael Grimm currently has a 4-point lead over his Democratic challenger Dominic Recchia. A new poll surrounding the race is supposed to come out tonight around 7 o'clock. 18th district in the Hudson Valley, the things flip-flopped in recent years here, razor thin as it relates to the difference in terms of the registrations with Democrats, Republicans. Also very close. Incumbent Sean Patrick Maloney facing off against former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth. And again, a poll shows Maloney, he's only leading by 5 points. And then you go up to the 19th, where Republican incumbent Chris Gibson, he's leading Sean Eldridge by 23 points, virtually unchanged from a poll last month. And Gibson up big time in that one. All right, let's start off in Long Island. I moderated a debate earlier this week between Bishop and Zeldin. And you could get the sense what's going on nationally, which is Democrats are going to have to do more than just say, you know, give me 2 more years. There is this undercurrent out there, and they are so much on their heels. Bishop's always had some tough races, but this time around, you know, he was playing or trying to play rope-a-dope the whole time here and doing everything he could to disassociate himself from the president. We're seeing that everywhere, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. And I think with regard to that particular race, there's a pretty good contrast of personalities. Yep. You know, Bishop, he's the wonk. He's been around for a long time. As you know, they've been coming at him for the past couple cycles, and they have not managed to dislodge him. Zeldin, who I know and reported on when he was a member of the state Senate, he's a young buck. He's a smart guy. He comes off well, and he looks like a nice, fresh face. So I know that that one's looking tight in the polls, and you know, I think that things like the Newsday endorsement, which came down for Zeldin, could help give him a shot.
That endorsement had an interesting angle, which is, you know, why send Tim Bishop to be a backbencher on the minority side when you can put Lee Zeldin in office and he can actually caucus with the majority?
And this is the definition of inside baseball, but a lot of people are mad about that because you're basically endorsing somebody depending on not if they're good or they're bad, but which party they are and who might have a better job in a committee. You know. Let's go to Staten Island, though, because this one, tell the truth. If I told you a few months ago, as well as you know Staten Island, that with all the baggage that Grimm's carrying around, that as much as the Republicans were treating him like he was toxic and he had maybe one person working for him, that we'd be sitting here 3 days from the election and he'd be up and be the betting money, the probable guy who'll win? Would you ever have bought that?
No. Now, just as a point note, he is below 50%. He's at 44%. And as we all know, undecided voters, when they walk into a booth, usually go for the challenger. So the fact that he is leading at this point with 44 points is not enough of a reason to directly rule him out. What's amazing is how unprepared Dominic Recchia, the Democratic candidate, appears to have been. He went through a nominal challenge to get the Democratic nomination, but a number of other sitting elected officials decided not to run. And this proves 2 facts about politics that I always found amazing. Number one is an obvious flaw against your opponent is sometimes elusively deceptive to cash in on. How do you run against a candidate with a 20-count indictment? If you keep repeating it, and that's the only thing, some voters may not care about it. The second thing is you can't beat nobody. You can't beat somebody with nobody. And Recchia's unpreparedness has been a glaring problem. And Staten Island voters, a community that is often considered a forgotten borough, want someone who is literally there with them. That borough suffered through Hurricane Sandy. Michael Grimm was one of the faces of people of government actually trying to get something done. Where was Recchia during that time? It's a question. So,
but what I don't get, Dominic, is it's not like this guy all of a sudden, you know, showed up in spring and said, hey, you know, I'm going to run for Congress and never been. I know the city council isn't the U.S. Congress, but he'd been there, and most people called him competent when he was there. it's been so bad. The most basic questions, he becomes marble mouth on. I do remember somebody that you would figure would have been at least prepared for what was coming that seemed to be so caught off guard.
I think the marble mouth charge is a bit ridiculous. You're not the only one that's made it. Many others have made it.
I've heard it.
Including The Daily Show. But I agree with Ozzy as far as when you look at Hurricane Sandy, Grimm was there. He's seen as a fighter, a strong fighter for his hometown borough. He's articulate, law enforcement background, as you know, FBI. And let's face it, we don't like to admit this, but he's got the looks. And the looks play a large role sometimes. It worked for Obama nationally, and it appears to be working
But
for
isn't
Grimm
there a rule of
on
politics,
Staten Island.
though, Dom, regardless of where it is, nobody, no county, no borough wants to be embarrassed. They don't want that guy to be the face. He's looking at a 20-count indictment. He's trying to throw a reporter off a balcony, and sometimes that might make you popular. But my only point is, still, you don't want to be the punchline guy. And right now, that's what he's looking at.
But
I
if
thought
you
that'd be
talk-
enough.
But if you talk to many Staten Island residents, they will tell you, in this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. And they are standing by him, and he may very well have to resign 3 months after being reelected, Michael Grimm. But as of right now, Staten Island residents, it appears, based on polling, they are sticking by their guy.
And Richard, if I can just say 2 words, Buddy Cianci.
He was at least a charming rogue. I mean, Grimm, he ain't warm and cuddly, you know? And
It's like pick your punchline on Staten Island.
I
which,
guess.
which one are you
I
less
guess.
embarrassed
All
about?
right, talk about the Maloney Hayworth race, Andrew, because to me, you know, we've done every cycle. It flip flops. It's a razor thin. Nan Hayworth, though, has separated herself. She's had a really interesting thing. She went from embracing the Tea Party to then kind of staying away from it, even though the optics didn't help her out. Now she's running again, and I'm not sure exactly what the message is. I think she's hoping to get caught up in a wave.
She was also tethered to John Boehner when the debt limit stuff happened in 2011, and now she won't tell me whether she'll even vote for him for speaker if she's reelected. This district, more than any other in our region, strikes me as being a proxy for the national mood. It's flipped every single election since 2008, and in an even year, if the president and the Democrats' numbers weren't bad, Sean Patrick Maloney should win re-election in this race. But because Republicans seem to be running about 5-6 points ahead of where they would be on the national level, that evens it up. And I think this is going to come down to the momentum as people walk into the ballot box on Tuesday, not just in the district, but on a national sense, too.
By the way, there's a lot of dumb ads this time around. This morning I saw one that he wants 2 sets of rules when it comes to drones, you know, because one covered his wedding or not. There's an actual ad that's running right now. But I think Andrew's right. Now, move a little north of that because, you know, you covered Gibson when he was in the state legislature, and now he's got an interesting challenger. He's got a lot of money, but it's, you know, if you're seen as a carpetbagger, it's hard to disprove that. And I think in this case, there's some legitimate points attached to it.
Well, Gibson wasn't in the state legislature.
I'm sorry, yeah.
But I covered his first race against Scott Murphy, who was a Democratic congressman who essentially inherited the mantle of Kirsten Gillibrand in the old 20th district. It was sort of an interestingly drawn district. A few things that people need to know about Gibson, regardless of who his challenger is, he works really hard. He is an incredibly intense person. He spent 24 years in the U.S. Army. He's the kind of guy who has been deployed overseas into combat zones, and I believe he still sleeps on his office floor in Congress. He says he's treating it just like any other deployment that he's conquered. He's very high energy. He's got a record of achievement, and you know, it's something that we can snicker about, but it resonates with voters when
Is
he's
he really
everywhere
moderate,
and where he's.
or is it just he's the most moderate Republican because there's none left?
You know, I think that Chris Gibson has certainly, in this era of hyperpartisanship, done quite a bit to distance himself, right? When he and I would speak during the big debates, as Andrew mentioned, over the debt ceiling debacle, talking about whether or not we should default, he was always a voice that said we should take the deal. And he, interestingly, would explain, and he said, look, I've studied the Constitution, and our founders say that we were supposed to take a deal, that the point was to compromise. The point was not to blow the whole thing up.
Imagine that. Compromise in Washington. And hey,
But of course, the Democrats charge, you know, Gibson's not a moderate where it matters. They point to votes on reproductive health that they say make him anti-choice and out of step with the district. They point to several other items in his record. But at the same time, I think given his intensity, given that moderation, and given, as you said, the well-worn knocks on the challenger, Sean Eldridge, that he is very young, that he has a tenuous connection to the district, hasn't lived there a very long time, and that he does seem to have most principally brought a fat wallet to this race. You know, I think that's why we're seeing such disparity in the polls.
And just as a side point, whether it be with Mr. Eldridge or whether it be with Mr. Maloney, the fact that they're gay is totally inconsequential to this race, or at least as it relates to the candidates and what's being said. And I think
certainly not explicit.
Right, and I think in 2014 that says how fast the velocity of that issue has become almost a non-issue. All right, when we come back, we will turn to New York State Senate, which is up for grabs. Outside donors, could they be controlling the potential outcome of the race? We'll talk about that and more after this.